Hey 5-to-1 Exchange, I hope you guys are having a good afternoon so far. Today's devotional picks up on the story of Esther. Now this story is very interesting, it's very important for the Jewish people. They actually have a holiday that's based around the events of what happens in this story. It's the holiday called Purim, and it celebrates Queen Esther saving the Jews from destruction while they were imprisoned by the Persian kingdom. And so we pick this story up, and what's happened is King Ahasuerus, who is the Persian king at the time, is having this massive festival, and he invites the queen, Queen Vashti, to come, and he basically just wants to show off how beautiful she is to his gathered guests. Now, Queen Vashti, when she's invited, refuses to go before the king. Now, you can imagine this upsets the king quite a bit, and in Persia, the king basically had ultimate authority over everything. He was viewed as a king and as a god, and so he declared that Queen Vashti was no longer a queen, that she'd be removed from her position of royalty. And so some time goes by, and the king remembers what's happened, and he realizes he wants another queen. So King Ahasuerus gets the scribes together, and they start scouring the land of Persia for all the beautiful young women, and they bring them in a couple at a time, and they put them through this beauty process. He's kind of shallow if you're kind of picking that up, but he puts the women through this beauty process, and then each of them are brought before the king, and the king decides if he likes them. The ones he likes, they stay and become part of his harem, which was kind of like a large collection of girlfriends, and they live in the palace. Now, Esther is a young Jewish girl at this time, and her father is dead. She's living and raised by her cousin Mordecai. And when this happens, Esther gets picked up. It's noted that Esther was incredibly beautiful, so she's picked up and taken to the palace. And while she's there going through her training, for which took about a year, she earns a lot of favor with the king's subjects. And so they give her extra servants, they give her extra treatment. And when it's finally her time to go before the king, she was allowed to take one item with her. And so Esther, being pretty wise, turns to the king's head servant, Haggai, and asks him, "What should I take with me?" And he tells her what to take. And so when she appears before the king, rather than taking her own item, she took an item that would please the king. And so what ends up happening is Esther earns an incredible amount of favor with the king as well. So much so that Esther doesn't just become part of his harem, one of his girlfriends, he takes her basically to be the Queen of Persia. And so she is now Queen Esther. Now, as the story goes on, there's another individual that comes. His name is Haman, and Haman earns some favor with the king, and Haman hates the Jews who are living in Persia at this time. And so Haman kind of sneakily gets the king to sign a decree saying that it's going to be legal to execute all the Jews on a certain day, that anyone in the kingdom of Persia can take up a weapon and attack a Jewish individual, basically to get rid of the Jews. Kind of sounds a lot like the Holocaust. But what happens is Mordecai, Esther's cousin, hears about this, and he goes to Esther and tells Esther, this is what's going to happen. They're going to execute all of the Jews. You as the queen are in a position of authority, and you're able to go before the king and let him know this. And so what happens is that when Esther hears this command, she becomes afraid, because here was the rule in Persia at the time. If anybody went before the king without being summoned by him, the king could have them executed on the spot. The way that the king would show that he wanted them to be there was, as they came before him, he would extend a golden scepter to them. If he extended the golden scepter, their lives were spared and they could speak to the king. If they came before the king into his throne room uninvited and he didn't extend the scepter, they were immediately executed for coming unannounced. And so Esther hears what's happening, that Mordecai's asking her, go to the king, ask him, try to find something that you can do. And Esther says this. She sends a message back to Mordecai saying, if I do this, Mordecai, I might die. The king hasn't actually asked for me in about 30 days now. And so if I just go into the throne room like that, he could execute me on the spot. And in verse 13 of chapter 4, this is what Mordecai says. Mordecai tells the messenger to go back to Esther. And he says, tell her this, don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you're in the king's palace. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place, but you and your father's family will be destroyed. Who knows, perhaps you've come to your royal position for such a time as this. And what Mordecai is saying is this, he's saying, Esther, if you won't go in and talk to the king and try to stop this, God will bring some other relief for the Jews, but you will not be included because of your unfaithfulness. And then he looks at her, and this is honestly one of the most interesting verses in the entire Bible. He says to Esther, Esther, who knows, maybe you've become queen of Persia just for this moment right now. And you see, in our lives, we face a lot of different opportunities and events. Some are good, some are bad. But we don't know if the position that we're in, the things that we're going for, where we're at, that we are right there for the sake of something else. We might be going through a difficult time, but we don't know if we're going through that difficult time so that we can be a benefit to others. When we receive blessings, when things are going well, it's great to enjoy those, but we don't know if maybe we're receiving those blessings for another reason. Maybe where we're at for such a time as this, to be able to help, to be able to aid, to be able to point people to Christ. And that's what Mordecai tells Esther. Esther, maybe the whole reason that you've been brought into the kingdom and made the queen is so that you can stop this. And so Esther ends up going before the king. She uses her wisdom and her skills. She goes and sets up a banquet and very cleverly broaches this conversation with the king and Haman, who are at this feast that she's making, and reveals Haman's plan to the king. And the king is enraged because this is Esther's people. He didn't realize Esther was a Jew at first. And he realizes these are Queen Esther's people, and he becomes enraged. And so they execute Haman for trying to, one, trick the king and also destroy the Jews. And so in chapter 8, we pick up Esther and Mordecai are before the king, and Esther addresses the king. She falls at his feet, weeps and begs, asking him to revoke the evil of Haman and the plot he devised against the Jews. Because if you remember from the story of Daniel, once the king of Persia had made a law, there was no way to go back on it. It was set in stone. You'd think that the king, being all-powerful, could just say, you know what, I'll make a new law, that one is irrelevant now. But that was not how their culture worked. Once the king made a law, it was set. So King Ahasuerus, loving Esther, and Esther's earned so much favor, has this idea. He says, Esther, tell you what, I'm going to make a new law. I'm going to let you write it. You write whatever you think is best for your people in light of what's going on. And so they write this new law, and they send it out throughout the kingdom. This is what the law was in verse 11 of chapter 8. The king's edict, or law, gave the Jews in each and every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and to take their possessions as spoils of war. This would take place on a single day throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. And so the law that Esther writes and that the king signs is this, that when people come to attack the Jews, every Jew is legally allowed to defend themselves and kill his attackers. There will be no penalty. Every Jew is allowed to rally together and attack whoever tries to harm them. And so we see that because of this, as the story goes on, the Jews are saved. Everyone who tries to attack the Jews are legally allowed to defend themselves, and the Jews conquer these people who are trying to attack them. And what happens is this, the reason that they celebrate this festival of Purim is looking at what Esther did. Esther, who was just a simple Jewish girl at the start of this story. And many of us may think, I'm just a simple individual. I don't have a lot of power or authority. But Esther, being a simple individual, was brought into a very unique situation. And it's tempting to look at that and say, well, that's awesome. Her time's come. She gets to enjoy life. She's the queen of the greatest empire on earth at this time. But the reason that she was brought there was something much greater than herself. It was to stop the annihilation of an entire people group. And you see, in our lives, sometimes, as we said, we get the opportunity to do incredible things. We get amazing blessings, and sometimes we're put in difficult spots. And it's easy to look at that short-sightedly just in the moment. Man, this is awesome. I'm going to enjoy this opportunity. Or, man, this is terrible. I just can't wait for this to end. But sometimes the position that we're in, the opportunities that we have, are there so that we can accomplish or be a part of something so much greater than just us. As you go through your week, as we're stuck in this quarantine, which hopefully is coming to an end, I want you to look around. You're stuck at home. Yes, you were quarantined. Yes, you're in an unfavorable situation. But is there an opportunity where you're at to bless someone around you, to be an encouragement to someone around you that will do so much more good than just sitting in that moment and waiting for the quarantine to end? Guys, I love you. I'm so excited that I get to meet with you, that I get to be your youth pastor. I love doing these devotionals with you. I hope they're an encouragement to you. If you have any comments, I'd love to know what you're thinking about this passage and this series. Feel free to comment on this video or message us on Instagram and tell us how your day is going. Middle schoolers will be meeting with you tonight, and high schoolers, I will talk with you guys tomorrow night. I hope your day goes well, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care, guys.